Even though only a decade has passed since we embarked on Fury Road, the tools have changed already quite dramatically. And I'm driven by the curiosity I have about story. Not only how to tell stories, but why we tell stories.
This is the truth. Whispered to me by Furiosa herself.
So we'll see everything we might remember from Fury Road up on the horizon. You're going to see war boys praising the Immortal Joe just as little tableaus.
What was your approach on this film, and why, in some ways, was it so different from Fury Road when Fury Road worked so well in the end?
Well, the one thing that you can't do if you're doing a prequel or a sequel is repeat the same tropes that you may have established in the previous film. If it just repeats what we did in Fury Road, then I think it'll be seen as a cynical exercise. Every time you see something repeating what was successful in the past, people become anesthetized to it.
It's a very different production. I definitely don't see it as a bigger challenge, maybe because the first experience has dulled my senses. I don't want to go sidetracking on Stories of Fury Road, but that was a massively complicated film, not only to get up, but the actual complexity of shooting in Namibia could have destroyed that film. I remember thinking, wow, we should have shot Furiosa.
In Fury Road, all the exposition was picked up on the run. In order to do that, we had to know so much about that world. We had to know where Furiosa came from, what forged her as a person, where did she learn her skills.
It was a script that existed before we even shot Fury Road. At one point in time, we had decided to make an anime, a sort of a marketing add-on to Fury Road. We didn't do that. It all fell over, but some great ideas came from it.
When I read it, we were still doing Fury Road. The script that we had to do for Fury Road was half storyboards anyway, so it was like, oh, a script, that's quite a novel idea. And it was a classic page turner. It grabbed you from the outset.
It's not only about Furiosa, it's about the world from which she came. So everybody was able to benefit from that document. And we thought, hey, if Fury Road can get some traction, then eventually we'll make the story. It's been 9 years since Fury Road, and we've got the film.
This is a very different animal, a much different story, and George wishes to tell it in a far different way. George is fully imagining in the computer the environments, the vehicles, the movement, the camera positions, so that all of it rigorously goes to tell the story the way he specifically wants that symphony to be heard.
We ended up shooting most of this film in Sydney. I mean, the weather was crap, but nobody was going to pretend we were going back to Namibia.
Even the action is different. It's not quick cuts. You know, this is hard for the marketing people because it's not Fury Road 2. It's not George making another 90-minute action film.
Of course, there's action sequences. You know, I'm addicted to that. For me, action is the purest use of the film language. But this is a 16-year saga. It's an odyssey. Now, the purpose of Odyssey is not the actual events that happen so much as what happens to her in that attempt to get home. In a world where there's no rule of law or any rules but to survive, what's left of you having gone through all of this?
In this tribe that Dementus has gathered, we all have the same purpose. It's survival. You know, we're in such a brutal environment, barren wasteland. We can't afford ourselves many luxuries.
This is not the kind of world that we grew up in. When we made the first Mad Max, we realized we're not going to be able to shoot this film on budget if we set it in modern-day Melbourne. So we shot in the back streets and the outskirts of the city. And in order to explain all that, we had the simple caption at the beginning of the story. So it became a dystopian world. It was purely driven out of necessity. And then, to my surprise, it seemed to resonate around the world.
In all of my initial conversations with George, there was a couple of key phrases that kept coming up. One was, survival in extremis reveals the true essence of the person. And that was kind of our guiding light on this film. What is the true essence of each of these characters? Because survival in extreme situations will reveal that. You have less food, everything's kind of gone to shit, so that disillusionment is something I hadn't thought about.
That's what happens in every bit of life. That's the negotiation of life. When we're auditioning, we have people send in tapes.
Who said, I want you to do a speech from the movie Network, and that speech is, I guess you would call it mad as hell.
That's very useful. It's a monologue. They're looking at the camera and they're addressing the world out there. The other thing they had to do in that tape was to talk about what their response would be to a world that collapsed very rapidly.
So my parents travelled down this way here.
He's one of the first of the generation that is going to grow up as a wasteland kid.
If you're from the criminal world, when you go into this world, you have a bad advantage. Yeah.
It was really interesting how everyone was able to come up with a plan.
I'm here just to help Dementus feel how he's feeling, fill in the gaps of his emotions.
It's not really rehearsals, it's a month of discussions. I think if you're a nomadic tribe and you suddenly stop, I said to my parents, I was like, I love working with this man because I feel like I'm at university. I have reasons for my reasons, for my reasons, for my reasons, for my reasons, and I am on it in every single regard.
Nico Lathouris, who's the co-screenwriter, and if you're a Mad Max fan, go right back to the first Mad Max film. Nico plays the grease rat who Max roughs up.
Nico is George's dramaturg, and he also takes a certain amount of responsibility for holding that space to give the two actors a bit of wiggle room before a take.
Working with George, I suppose the thing I've learned most, it's simply listening to other people and being receptive to each and everyone's ideas.
Fang got the drop on them, caught the two off their heads and brought their heads to Dementus, and that impressed Dementus.
I don't know, just as he say it to his face.
When you've had the luxury of a rehearsal prep period like we had on this film with George, many, many discussions, months of discussions prior to shooting about who this guy once was, who he is deep down in the quiet places. So each thing that he did, no matter how violent or brutal, in his interpretation came from the right place.
It feels to me, if I'm going to try and win over her confidence, to keep her in this space, it feels a little threatening. So it's like, let's get out of here for a second.
Behind all of that, there's the ability that George has to get from the actors or the crew the very best that they can offer.
George is a really nice guy, and he's always there to help.
Quaden was 9. He has achondroplastia, and he was being bullied at school. And his mother, Yarika, filmed him crying and saying that he no longer wanted to be alive because of the oppression he feels at school. And people were outraged because it was so authentic. I gave him a tiny little part in 3,000 Years of Longing, and I realized this kid is really, really good. So when it came time to get one of these kids, a war pup as we call them, I went straight to him.
I watched the Fury Road. When I seen it, I was like, wow, that's crazy.
It was just a way of saying, forget those darker souls. You've got something really, really effective about you.
I'm a Mad Max fanatic. I think you need to know that, okay? My whole life, I've wanted to be in one of these movies. As an Australian male and an Australian actor, this is Valhalla for me.
Doing my best in the wasteland. Things can get lonely out here. You gotta look for company.
The first character I was offered was the character of Rizdale Pell. When I was reading the script, I asked Dr. George who's playing the Immortan Joe, because Hugh Keays-Byrne had passed away, and Hugh, of course, was the toe cutter in the first Mad Max. He said, oh, look, we're probably just going to get a sort of a stand-in or a body double and we'll do some deep fake stuff. And I said, well, I think I could do it. I know how to do the voice, and I'm the same height. And I want to be the custodian of the character.
You are awaited.
There is a scene where the Immortan has come up with a plan on how we're going to save the Empire.
At first light, leave for Bullet Farm with your tankers empty.
I didn't know his relationship with Praetorian Jack. And this is where the backstories pay off. Tom, in 15 seconds, explained it. Praetorian Jack's parents were in the military, had served with Colonel Joe Moore before he was Immortan Joe, and so Praetorian Jack is kind of like a surrogate son. Action. And instead of saying, da-da-da, you do this, the hands suddenly become like a bit more paternalistic.
As soon as you can, return here with all the munitions you can load. Understood?
Give him a good hearty way. When you have a sense of a character and who they are, and then you're asking an actor to represent and deliver that character, you intuitively feel antecedents, the things that form that actor as a person. And there has to be some overlap. You lift that and you join in the Immortan.
Got it.
That's
So one Immorta love comes out. One day he asked me to justify making the film to him. So he said, why are we making this movie? Why are we even making it? You have to pitch me making this film. And I see it as a cautionary tale. I see it as presenting a world that is wildly entertaining, supremely beautiful in terms of the artistry that everyone else brings to it. But the reality of that universe is not terribly far off.
We begin with the many skulls, the many deaths, the downfall of civilization and man. Arising from it, the Immortan himself. At the moment, not yet an Immortan, but Colonel Joe Moore. In the crucible of this battle, he becomes more and more important, taking over both armaments and fuel, bowing down to him in the citadel itself, the war boys, the wretched, and those who are left, who all must obey, and after a glorious death in battle, may go to Valhalla and rise up to happiness in the Garden of Eden.
In the wasteland, everything must be made from found objects repurposed. There's no manufacture of anything new. That's why there are no electric cars. There's no power grid, and you can't repair computer chips. But you can go back to earlier technology.
I remember walking into the watchtower, and there's a mirror made out of old phones. And I just looked at George and I was like, we have to shoot this. This is awesome.
He's been building this world over, 45 years. So there is a depth to it and understanding to it that no one else is ever going to have.
He's a wasteland entrepreneur. He's always got the next idea. Yeah.
It's one of George's main tenets. If something is to survive, it has to have an innate worth. And that worth can be beauty, it can be mechanical wonder, it can just be that, pragmatically, this is the best way to kill the bastard who wants to kill you. Dementus's Lamat, the late 1850s, 1860s revolver. Beautiful weapon. Dementus being the king of con men, basically this unit. Shut up, please! Thanks, Larry! Dementus always has a trick up his sleeve. Apart from the 9 shots, also had a secondary barrel.
Yes, excellent, excellent.
Armaments are hard to come by in the wasteland. Furiosa's weapon is both knuckle dusters, dagger, and gun. This was known as the Apache. It was used by gangs in Paris for super close contact. It's not very accurate given the size of the barrel, but I think once you've impaled someone with the dagger, you've got a pretty good chance of not missing.
So this is just my knife here. which was made out of a bone, which we found in the wasteland. That's one of my weapons. That's a spanner that I can hook like that. I can hold it like that, and I can fix things with it, like my bike.
George always said just because it's the wasteland and it is all dirty and desperate and all that, it doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. Obviously, there's no wasteland supermarket. They're going to make clothes last and last and last. They're going to use anything they can find. I have to say this, I keep nothing from films normally, but these I really loved. There's a third one, he's even more disgusting. The bear became quite a big part of Chris Hemsworth's look. And the bear, I think, was just because he's such a damaged character. It's his thing from childhood.
Why don't you just keep him safe?
If you actually Google grown men and teddy bears, you'll see quite a lot on the internet. So it's obviously not an entirely unknown phenomenon.
A lot of this all comes out of George's head too. So you may think he's a sweet individual, but he's twisted.
To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
Every single thing they're wearing is there to keep them alive. It's to do with breathing, because none of them can breathe. It's so toxic. The Immortan Joe's body is rotting.
You don't wear that costume, it wears you. All in, it's about 40 kilo. If you come back and watch Fury Road, Hugh is in that full get-up, running. I'm thinking, how can he do it? I was like the Tin Man, you know, I couldn't even sit down without like 8 people helping me, or I'd just tip over and roll down the set.
George's other great mantra is keep it simple, which we do until we don't.
All over my body, this history is all over my body, all over my clothes. He needed to put it down so that he could remember everything in the past. Because there's nothing, there are no books left, there's nothing left.
The text for History Man came about from lots of different sampling and research, and it ended up, Jenny just really liked the scribbles that I was doing, so it's actually my handwriting. This is Scrotus. His tunic is made from fish skins because he has some kind of skin disease, and so this is bandaging to keep him from feeling so itchy.
Scrotus's amygdala is supercharged. He is constantly in an aggressive, impulsive state.
He's a very angry boy. As you can see, his veins are permanently popping out of his head.
Josh has got a very kind of pronounced forehead, and so we've just given him a real heavy brow. We've added some rashes, some blemishes on his face, all through his body. Yeah, it's pretty gross what we do. It's, but you know, it's fun.
Bigger, faster, stronger, further!
Well, I think George was like his brother, a GP, before he came into the film world. So he's very precise about things like wounds and different ailments people have and deformities. He will tell us about diseases or things that we didn't know about, and then we can look them up.
Cutis, verticus,
Gyrata. This is a Praetorian Jack dummy, but he's a lot more rusty coloured than he is normally, isn't he?
Yeah, look, this is after he's been dragged along the desert earth. You can see he's quite dusty still. These are some of the different arms that we created for Furiosa.
That's what's left hanging, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's what's left once she's chopped her own hand with a bit of steel. Is the arm okay, George?
It looks fantastic.
Anya's didn't make up a lot, and so we opted to do all this as a sock. So her arm comes out here, and we put a green stocking on that.
Look how creepy that is.
The loss of the arm and the building of the mechanical arm, for me personally, it was something that was really helped by both George and lovely Chris, who made my arm and who is my arm accompanier.
This is Anya's claw, so we've managed to reproduce it pretty much exactly to Fury Road. It's kind of as close to the original as possible.
This wondrous piece of machinery was developed for the Chief High Blackfinger, the head mechanic of the cathedral, who, as his own body fell apart, has engineered extensions later used and utilised by Furiosa to build her prosthetic arm.
We had to kind of reverse engineer the path of this arm. You can see the core elements where the arm came from, and then she makes it into a thing of war and beauty.
Sit down.
No, that kind of freaks me out.